Now for the View from Congress, I am joined by the House Republican leader, John Boehner, and the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, Chris Dodd. And you heard Secretary Paulson there, Senator Dodd. He said this has to happen within days. Will it?
I hope so. I describe it this way. I think we need to act quickly but deliberately. And there are three clusters of issues along which the Secretary's talked about. I think there is an interest in reciprocity, and I'll explain that in a minute if you care to. Secondly, I think there's a real interest as well in oversight and accountability that I think all of us are going to be interested in. How's this working? This shouldn't just fall on his lap at all. We need to watch this and monitor this. And then governance questions in a way. How's this going to work? And debt issues in a way. How do we manage all of this? But I think our interest, and Harry Reid has talked to me at length over the last 2 days, we want to be cooperative, work together. John and I heard a very sobering conversation the other night. John Boehner was eloquent in the meeting, I might point out, and talking about the moment we're in, and we're 40 days away from a national election. But this issue supersedes an election. We need to get this right. We need to do it quickly, but also
So you were both convinced that the consequences of not acting would be catastrophic?
They would be. You know, this makes me angry. I think it makes the American people angry that their tax money has to be put at risk. But at the end of the day, this isn't about Wall Street, and it's not about commercial paper and all of the other nonsense you hear talked about. It's about protecting our economy, protecting Americans' jobs, their bank accounts, their retirement securities, their college savings fund. And this is not a time for ideological purity. I'm a free market non-interventionist, but we face a crisis. And if we don't act, and we don't act quickly, we're going to jeopardize our economy, Americans' jobs, and our savings.
Does that mean that Secretary Paulson is going to get what he's asked for, a completely clean bill, no protections for homeowners facing foreclosure, no restrictions on executive compensation for the firms?
Not necessarily. And again, we're all talking about this right now. I had a long conversation with Senator Shelby, my Republican counterpart, last evening on the Banking Committee, as well as dozens of members. I'm sure John has over the last day or so. People have a lot of ideas on what they think ought to be in or not in this package. My general thrust, George, is this. I think the authority, we need to give the Secretary the authority to work. These are complex issues. I don't think we want to micromanage that part of it. I happen to believe very strongly, as you heard again the Secretary say this morning, that the cause of this issue is still the bad lending practices. The foreclosure issue still lurks. We can't just deal with that issue optically. You've got to deal with that issue of foreclosure, or this problem will persist.
Inside this legislation?
Well, not inside it. There are things that we might do to help clean up a lot of these bad mortgages out there, which are still lingering around, millions of them potentially. We need to try and address that without compromising the ability of the Secretary to get rid of the toxic instruments that exist in these institutions that clog up the system where credit doesn't flow. So I think there'll be some effort with reciprocity. If we're going to spend taxpayer money to get rid of bad debt in these places, what is the reciprocal obligation?
From the firms.
From the firms or someplace. I haven't defined that yet. No one else has yet. But I think there's going to be a strong interest to deal with the Main Street aspects, as John just said.
We've already dealt with that when we passed the housing bill last summer. Now, I didn't vote for it because it had a $300 billion bailout for scam artists and speculators and others who are out in the housing industry. But there are a lot of tools in there to help the Federal Housing Administration deal with the foreclosure problems that's out there. We need to rise above partisan politics. And I know that that's a big statement right on the eve of an election. But we have to rise above this and deal with this as adults. The American economy depends on this. The American people are depending upon us. And I think they're looking to us to give the Secretary these powers as quickly as possible. There are a lot of well-meaning, well-intentioned ideas out there, but they don't need to be part of this package.
But I guess I get that, but I'm going to come back to the same question I asked Secretary Paulson. I can imagine a lot of people sitting home right now and saying, but wait a second, you know, when I was facing bankruptcy, losing my health insurance, the government didn't move on a dime for me. Now the banks are in trouble. Boy, it's all got to happen within days.
Well, I think the point is, and I disagree with John at this point, I think this is part of the solution. It isn't just optics or good politics. Again, you've heard the Secretary and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve say over and over again. We've had 65 hearings in the Senate Banking Committee in 18 months on the subject matter. And as John knows, we went through a long effort to get this housing bill done, went through 6 filibusters over it. The fact of the matter is the cause, it isn't just an effect, the cause of this problem is still the foreclosure crisis, the problem there. So it needs to be part of the solution. That's not to clog this up. We need to act quickly and deliberately, and we will, in my view. But you need to also consider the effects of this and the causes of this. And if we don't, I think the public will react negatively. If that's the case, then this may not work. So we've got to pull together. I'm confident we can.
Several of members of your caucus have already come out against this, including Mike Pence, one of the conservative leaders in the House. He says, you know, in a free market, Companies have to be free to fail.
I understand that. And if this were about a company here or there failing, I wouldn't be for intervening in any way, shape, or form. This is about our way of life, our society, our economy, the American people's jobs, their savings. This isn't about Wall Street. That's how serious this crisis is. And while I hope it works, and we want it to work, there's no guarantees here.
So what is it you all both think will happen? I mean, just to specify this out a little bit more, if you don't pass this bill this week.
Well, this is, again, I don't want to use the language, and I don't think John does either, because the language has an impact. But let me tell you, as I said a moment ago, we've been in a lot of meetings over the years together and a lot of critical moments. When the chairman of the Federal Reserve described the situation to us, George, there was a pause for about 10 or 15 seconds when nothing was said. The air came out of the room. It was that startling a description of where we were, both at home.
So give us that description. So what
George,
startled you? What made you silent?
George, you can't describe on Sunday morning how ugly this picture would look if we don't act.
Why not?
Because it's not just this country, it's globally as well. This is not just the financial markets here, it's global. And again, we've been lurching from failed institution to failed. We were talking off here about these Fridays we've gone through for 6 months where we get the calls on Friday, we've got another institution that's failing. We're now trying to deal with this systemically. And there are concerns whether this is work or not, but the not doing anything at this juncture.
George, this could be the most serious
worse.
financial crisis that the world has ever dealt with. And this is not a time for people to be playing games. It's not a time to be out scaring people. It's a serious crisis that affects our economy and the Americans' jobs and their savings. And we have to act to protect them.
Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to get at, because I think people hear you say it's serious. They see serious potential costs involved, and they want some flavor of what will happen if you don't act.
Well, I think that what you're talking about is not just a question of Wall Street. I mean, this is what happens in Main Street. Retirement accounts, 401s, pension funds, student loans, credit card debt is being securitized. What does it do to the people's ability to be able to finance their needs on a daily basis? Job creation in the country. All of this are the ripple effects of what could occur here, making what this cost is, and it's significant and sad and tragic, pale by comparison if we don't act. So the choice is for us, do we do something in response to what we've been told we must respond to, or do nothing and face the consequences? And I think what John and I are saying, with whatever disagreements we have what ought to be in this, we don't have any choice but to act.
And you have the votes to get this through?
Well, I believe so, because I'm listening to my colleagues, and again, they've got ideas. Listen, if I could write this alone, it would probably look differently. John would write it, I suspect it would look differently. The question is, 40 days away from a national election, this is hard. And we need to find a way right now. The American public are expecting us to act responsibly. I can tell you that Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi are determined to act quickly but deliberately, as I'm confident the Republican leadership
will. We don't need
as well.
535 members of Congress adding their best idea to this bill. We need to keep it clean, simple, move it through the House and Senate, and get it on the President's desk so that the Secretary can, in fact, intervene as quickly as possible.
And you agree clean and simple?
I want clean and simple, but again, I want accountability. I want some reciprocity here that doesn't get away and complicate the Secretary's job. But we're going to be talking about this for decades. And while we need to act quickly on this, there is an expectation as well that we'll act intelligently about this.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much.
Thank you, George.